All right, so today we're diving into some really fascinating stuff all about peak performance. You've provided us with these great resources, secrets to peak performance.pdf. And specifically, there are two sections in there. One is called Secrets to a Peak Performance Life. And then there's also Secrets to Peak Performance Fitness. And so I thought we could just kind of take a look at these and, see if we can extract some real gems, some actionable stuff that people can use right away.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach, cutting through the noise and getting to the core of what really makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, there's so much information out there, right? It's like, how do you even know where to begin?
Exactly. It can be overwhelming.
So, one of the first things that really jumped out at me was this whole concept of like building a strong foundation, before you can even think about achieving peak performance in like any area of your life.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you need a solid base to build upon, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting because the material even uses this term like personal foundation, like it's its own thing that you have to consciously cultivate.
It's almost like a prerequisite.
Yeah.
Like you can't really skip this step.
And what's really interesting is that they emphasize this idea of being, I don't know if I should say selfish, but like really prioritizing your own self-care.
Right, because it's not really selfish in the negative sense. It's more like recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. It's like that oxygen mask analogy. You have to put your own mask on first before you can help anyone else.
Yeah, and the material actually lays out like 10 specific stepping stones for building this personal foundation.
Mm.
And when you look at them all together, it's like a pretty comprehensive picture of like radical self-responsibility.
Wow, 10 stepping stones. That's a lot. What are
Yeah.
some of the key ones?
Well, um, yeah, it starts with things like dealing with any unresolved issues from the past, like having a completed past, they call it, and then living with integrity. Making sure your basic needs are met, setting clear boundaries, having high standards for yourself.
Okay, so it's like getting your own house in order first before you can even think about like, saving the world or whatever.
Exactly. And then it goes on to things like eliminating things, you're tolerating, cultivating a positive mindset, nurturing your family and community, and living a life that's guided by your values.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack, but it definitely feels like a holistic approach. It's not just about like one specific area of your life. It's about like addressing all these different aspects to create a really solid foundation.
Yeah, and the material actually suggests like a deliberate personal foundation program. Like you actually work through these different areas step by step.
That's interesting. So it's not just like a theoretical concept. They're actually giving you like practical steps to take.
Right. And they also emphasize like the power of just stopping tolerating things. Like if something is draining your energy or just not aligned with your values, like just stop putting up with it.
Oh, that's so true. I feel like I tolerate way too much stuff in my life.
We all do. It's like a human
Yeah.
tendency. But the more we can become aware of those tolerations and consciously choose to eliminate them, the more energy and clarity we'll have.
Yeah, I love that. And then there's also this point about like making sure your physical environment reflects your adult status, which I
Yeah.
thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah. What do you think they mean by that?
Well, I think it's about like taking ownership of your space, like if you're still living in a dorm room style apartment, even though you're like, 35 years old, it might be time to upgrade.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like creating an environment that supports who you are and who you're striving to become.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be like super fancy or anything, but just like, creating a space that feels good to be in and that reflects your values.
Right. And that supports your goals. If you want to be a writer, maybe having a dedicated writing space would be helpful.
Yeah, totally. So it's like all these different pieces kind of fitting together to create this strong foundation for personal growth.
Exactly. And one of the key stepping stones that we talked about earlier was setting boundaries. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, I know boundaries are so important, but they can be really tough to enforce.
Right. Because it involves like other people.
Yeah.
It's not just about like managing your own time or something.
Yeah, and the material makes this really clear distinction between boundaries, standards, and needs. Like they're all different things.
Right. So boundaries are specifically about like what other people cannot do to you or around you.
Oh, I see. So it's like setting limits on other people's behavior.
Exactly. And then standards are more about like your own personal expectations for yourself.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. And needs are like your basic requirements for survival and well-being.
Right. And it's important to have all three of these things in place. But boundaries are often the ones that people struggle with the most because they involve other people.
Yeah, totally. So how do you actually go about like setting and enforcing boundaries?
Well, the material actually provides a really helpful sequence of strategies. It starts with simply informing people about your boundaries.
Okay, so it's like just letting them know, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with and this is what I'm not comfortable with.
Exactly. And then if they continue to cross those boundaries, then you move to instruct to them. Like, please don't do that. Or I need you to stop doing that.
Okay, so it's like getting a little bit more firm.
Right. And then if they still don't get it, you can escalate to requesting them to change their behavior.
So it's like, please, would you mind doing this instead? Or could you please stop doing that?
Yeah. And then if that doesn't work, then you can move to warning them. Like, if you continue to do this, then there will be consequences.
Okay, so it's like letting them know that you're serious.
Right. And then if they still don't listen, then you can demand that they change their behavior.
And if they still don't respect your boundaries, then the final step is to remove yourself from the situation.
Exactly. It's like, I've tried everything else and I'm not going to tolerate this anymore, so I'm leaving.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful sequence. It's like giving people multiple opportunities to change their behavior, but also recognizing that you have the right to protect yourself.
Exactly. It's about being assertive and standing up for yourself,
Yeah.
but also being willing to walk away if necessary.
Yeah, I love that. So this all ties back into like living a values-based life, which is another cornerstone of that strong personal foundation.
Right. And the material has a really interesting technique for identifying your true core values. It says to think back to what you genuinely love doing around the age of 6.
Oh, that's fascinating. Why six?
Well, the idea is that at that age, you were probably making choices based on pure joy and intrinsic motivation,
Mm.
before society and all these external pressures really started to influence you.
Oh, that makes sense. Like you were just doing what you loved without really thinking about it.
Exactly. So it's a way to kind of tap back into that pure essence of who you are and what truly matters to you.
Yeah, I like that. And then once you've identified your core values, what do you do with them?
Well, the material recommends setting achievable goals that are directly aligned with each of your values.
Okay, so it's like using your values as a guide for your goal setting.
Exactly. And they say to choose your top 7 values to focus on.
7, that seems like a good number. Not too overwhelming, but still comprehensive.
Yeah, and the benefits of living this way are pretty profound. Like, it makes goal setting easier because you have a clear internal compass. It gives
Wow.
you a clear vision for your life. It reduces distractions because you know what truly matters. And ultimately, it leads to a greater sense of fulfillment because you're living in alignment with your authentic self.
Wow, that's so powerful. It's like when you're living in alignment with your values, everything just kind of falls into place.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And it makes decision making so much easier
Yeah.
because you're not constantly second guessing yourself. You just know what feels right and what feels wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so we've talked about building a strong foundation, getting clear on your values, setting boundaries, and all that good stuff. And I know another big part of peak performance is having tons of energy, right?
Absolutely. Energy is like the fuel that drives everything.
So, what are some of the key strategies for boosting your energy levels?
Well, the material jumps right into some fundamental dietary adjustments, like
Mhm.
cutting back on sugar and starches and avoiding alcohol.
Okay, that makes sense because those things can really mess with your energy levels, right?
Exactly. It's about avoiding those dramatic spikes and crashes in blood sugar.
Yeah.
Like you eat a donut and you get this initial burst of energy, but then you crash hard a couple hours later.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. And then alcohol can also make you feel sluggish and tired, even though it might initially feel like it's giving you a boost.
Right. So it's about choosing foods that provide sustained energy throughout the day.
Okay, so what are some good examples of foods that provide sustained energy?
Well, things like whole grains, fruits, vegetables, lean protein, healthy fats, basically whole unprocessed foods.
Gotcha. So it's like eating for fuel rather than for pleasure.
Well, you can definitely enjoy your food too, but it's about making conscious choices that support your overall well-being.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the material also talks about the importance of physical activity for boosting energy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Exercise is like a magic bullet for so many things, including energy levels.
So what kind of exercise are we talking about?
Well, they recommend daily aerobic exercise for about 25 to 30 minutes.
Okay, that's doable. And then they also mention some quick and easy techniques like deep breathing and shoulder shrugs.
Yeah, those are great for like releasing tension and improving circulation, which can definitely impact your energy levels.
And I love that they emphasize like the importance of taking regular stretching breaks and standing up frequently, especially if you have a desk job.
Oh, yeah, sitting for long periods can really zap your energy.
So it's like incorporating these little movements throughout the day to keep your body and your mind engaged.
Exactly. And then it's not just about the physical aspects either. There's a huge connection between our mind and our energy levels.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like if you're stressed out or anxious, it's going to drain your energy.
Right. And the material actually suggests things like staying positive, volunteering, and lifelong learning as ways to boost your energy.
That's interesting. So it's like finding things that give you a sense of purpose and engagement.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's strength training, which is so important for maintaining a healthy metabolism and preserving muscle mass.
Yeah. I've heard that muscle is like a metabolic furnace. It burns more calories even at rest.
Right. And the material wisely advises getting a medical checkup before starting any new exercise program and even investing in a few sessions with a qualified trainer.
Yeah, that's a good point. Safety first. And it's always helpful to have expert guidance, especially when you're starting out.
Totally. So now let's talk about nutrition for sustained energy, because that's another key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, food is fuel, right? So how do we fuel ourselves for peak performance?
The guidance is to eat smaller portions, but more frequently, about 4 to 6 meals throughout the day.
Okay, so it's like grazing rather than gorging.
Exactly. And it's about focusing on the quality of your food over sheer quantity.
So it's not just about counting calories, it's about making sure you're getting all the nutrients you need.
Right. And limiting simple sugars, which can give you those energy spikes and crashes.
Yeah, and then they also make this important point that our nutritional needs evolve as we age. So what worked in your 20s might not be optimal later in life.
Right. Our bodies change over time and our diets need to reflect that.
Okay, so what are some key nutritional considerations for different stages of life?
Well, for example, as we get older, our metabolism naturally slows down, so we might need to adjust our calorie intake accordingly.
Okay, that makes sense. And then are there any specific nutrients that become more important as we age?
Yes, definitely things like calcium and vitamin D for bone health, omega-3 fatty acids for brain health, protein for muscle maintenance.
So it's like paying attention to what your body needs at each stage of life.
Exactly, and making sure you're getting the right nutrients from your diet.
Okay, so we've talked about diet and exercise for boosting energy, but what about those times when you're feeling run down, like when you have a cold or the flu?
Yeah, those can really knock you off your feet.
So what's the best way to recover quickly and minimize energy loss?
Well, the material emphasizes the importance of listening to your body and prioritizing rest when you need it.
Okay, so it's like giving yourself permission to take a break and not push yourself too hard.
Exactly. And making sure you're getting enough sleep, staying well hydrated, eating nutritious meals, and using positive self-talk.
So it's like supporting your immune system and giving your body the resources it needs to heal.
Exactly. And then they also mentioned this interesting point about the importance of having toys.
Toys. What do they mean by that?
Well, they're talking about recreational, fun, non-competitive activities that help you de-stress and recharge.
Oh, I see. So it's like having things in your life that bring you joy and help you relax.
Exactly. And they emphasize that these activities should be non-competitive, so you're not adding more stress to your life.
Yeah, that's a good point because sometimes even hobbies can become stressful if you're too focused on competition.
Right. So it's about finding things that are purely for enjoyment and relaxation.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, building a strong foundation, energizing our lives, and now I think it's time to talk about getting started and staying motivated.
Yeah, because that's often the hardest part, right?
Totally. I know I've been guilty of procrastinating on things that I know would be good for me.
We all do it. But the material offers a surprisingly powerful mantra to combat procrastination. He says, today's the only day I've got.
Wow, that's simple but profound. It's like a
Yeah.
reminder that we don't have unlimited time.
Exactly. It forces you to focus on the present moment and not put things off until some imaginary future date.
I love that. And then when it comes to setting goals, they emphasize the importance of being realistic and celebrating progress no matter how small.
Yeah, because perfectionism can be a real killer. It's like if you're constantly striving for perfection, you're never going to get started.
So true. And it's like when you celebrate those small wins, it helps you stay motivated and keeps you moving forward.
Exactly. It's like building momentum. And then they also talk about the power of positive self-talk.
Oh, yeah, that's so important. Our inner dialogue can really make or break us.
Totally. And they give examples of internal coaching phrases you can use to counter negative thoughts.
So it's like being your own cheerleader.
Exactly. And then they also address the common challenges or bottlenecks we face in maintaining motivation, particularly in fitness.
Yeah, like what are some of those common bottlenecks?
Well, things like lack of time, feeling too tired, worrying about what others might think, all the usual suspects.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely used all of those excuses at some point.
We all have. But the key is to recognize them for what they are, just excuses, and to choose to take action despite those feelings.
Easier said than done sometimes, but I know it's possible.
And then the material really emphasizes the importance of building a supportive community.
Oh, yeah. Having people in your corner can make all the difference.
Absolutely. It's about connecting with family, friends, like-minded individuals, both in the real world and online, for accountability, encouragement, and shared experiences.
And they even mention specific examples like silver shoe clubs for walking and weight loss support groups.
Right. So it's about finding people who understand what you're going through and who can support you on your journey.
Okay, so we're motivated and ready to take action. Now let's dive into the specifics of optimizing your fitness.
All right, let's do it. This section is packed with practical training advice.
Perfect. I'm ready to get stronger and fitter.
Well, it starts by reinforcing the importance of strength training at any age.
Okay, so this isn't just for bodybuilders. We're talking about like everyone can benefit from strength training.
Exactly. It's crucial for combating the natural loss of muscle mass that occurs as we get older and for maintaining a healthy metabolism.
Yeah, I've heard that muscle burns more calories than fat, even at rest.
That's right. And it also helps to improve your bone density, balance, coordination, and overall strength.
Wow, so many benefits. And then they also caution against relying solely on excessive aerobic exercise without including strength training. Really? Why is that?
Well, it's because excessive cardio without strength training can actually lead to muscle wasting.
Oh, wow. That's counterintuitive. I thought cardio was always good for you.
It is in moderation,
Yeah.
but if you're not also building and maintaining muscle mass, you could actually be doing more harm than good.
Okay, that's a really important point to remember. So, what's the optimal balance between cardio and strength training?
Well, it depends on your individual goals and fitness level, but generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is to aim for at least 2 to 3 strength training sessions per week, and then you can supplement that with cardio as needed.
Gotcha. So, strength training is the foundation, and then cardio is like the icing on the cake.
Exactly. And then for those who prefer to exercise at home, the material offers some practical tips on setting up a home gym.
Oh, perfect. I'm all about convenience. So, what kind of equipment do they recommend?
Well, they suggest investing in some basic equipment like dumbbells, barbells, an adjustable bench, and an aerobic machine that you enjoy.
Okay, that doesn't sound too overwhelming. And then they also suggest seeking remote guidance from trainers and optimizing your workout space to make it more inviting.
Yeah, I know environment can really make a difference. Like if your workout space is cluttered and depressing, you're less likely to stick with it.
Exactly. So it's about creating a space that feels good to be in and that supports your fitness goals.
And then they even provide a range of sample home exercises that utilize minimal equipment like chairs and your own body weight.
Yeah, there are tons of great exercises you can do without any equipment at all.
That's awesome. So
Wow.
no excuses, right?
Exactly. And then when it comes to the core principles of effective strength training, they touch on things like workout frequency, repetition, speed volume, and intensity progressive overload.
Okay, can you break those down for me?
Sure. So workout frequency refers to how often you train each muscle group. They even suggest the potential for daily training if you're diligent about nutrition and recovery. Wow, daily training. That's hardcore. But I guess it makes sense if your body is properly fueled and rested.
Right, and then repetition speed refers to how quickly you perform each rep. They actually suggest using a fast repetition speed while maintaining good form.
Oh, that's interesting. I thought slow and controlled movements were always better.
Well, that's a common myth, but faster controlled movements can actually place a greater and more effective stress on the muscle fibers.
Okay, good to know. And then what about volume and intensity?
So volume refers to the total amount of weight you lift during a workout, and intensity refers to how heavy the weight is.
And what's the optimal balance between those two?
Well, it depends on your goals, but they recommend cycling through different levels of volume and intensity to keep your body challenged and prevent plateaus.
Gotcha. So it's about mixing things up. And then what is progressive overload?
That's the fundamental principle of consistently challenging your muscles to adapt and grow stronger.
So it's like gradually increasing the weight or the reps over time.
Exactly. You want to keep pushing your limits so your body continues to adapt.
Makes sense. And then they specifically highlight squats as a particularly beneficial exercise for men and lunges for women.
Right. Those are both compound exercises that work multiple muscle groups at once.
So they're super efficient. And then they also stress the importance of training different muscle groups from various angles to achieve more complete and balanced development.
Right. Hitting muscles from multiple angles ensures more thorough and well-rounded development, and it helps to prevent imbalances.
And they provide specific examples for exercises targeting the back and arms, like biceps and triceps.
Yeah, there are tons of great exercises out there for all the different muscle groups.
Awesome. So much to learn. And then they also talk about the often overlooked mental benefits of exercise.
Oh yeah, exercise is like a miracle drug for your brain.
So, what are some of those mental benefits?
Well, things like clearer thinking, improved mood regulation, reduced short-term memory loss, enhanced creativity.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like exercise makes you smarter, happier, and more creative.
Pretty much. And they offer practical tips for maximizing those benefits, like getting your heart rate up, listening to motivating music, squeezing in exercise during lunchtime.
Okay, those are all great tips. And then they also touch on rhythmic activities as being particularly beneficial for mental well-being.
Yeah, things like dancing, swimming, running, activities that have a repetitive rhythmic flow.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like a form of moving meditation.
Exactly. And then they also caution against overexertion, which can actually have negative effects on your mental state.
Oh, interesting. So it's like finding that sweet spot where you're challenging yourself, but not pushing yourself to the point of burnout.
Right, exactly. And then they have a short but important section on cellulite, which I know is a topic that a lot of women are concerned about.
Yeah, cellulite is definitely a common concern. So what do they say about it?
Well, they offer a realistic understanding of its nature as related to the structure of skin and underlying fat.
So it's not just about like being overweight or having too much fat.
Right, it's also about genetics and hormones and the way your connective tissue is structured.
Okay, that makes sense. And then do they offer any solutions for minimizing cellulite?
Well, they acknowledge the limited long-term effectiveness of topical creams and temporary treatments.
Yeah, I've heard those things are pretty much a scam.
Well, some of them might have temporary benefits, but they're not a magic bullet.
So what is the big approach for reducing cellulite?
Well, they suggest focusing on strategies for melting fat and boosting your metabolism, which we've already talked about, like strength training, cardio, and hydration.
Okay, so it's about taking a holistic approach to overall health and fitness.
Exactly. And then they also stress the importance of pushing your muscles to their capacity during workouts.
So it's like really challenging yourself and not just going through the motions.
Right, and avoiding that maintain mindset.
Mm.
Like if you just do the bare minimum to maintain your current fitness level, you're not really going to see any significant changes.
Okay, that's a good point. It's like you have to keep pushing yourself to make progress.
Exactly. And then they offer a bunch of practical tips for incorporating exercise into your daily routine.
Oh, I love practical tips. So what are some of their suggestions?
Well, things like scheduling your workouts, like any other important appointment, working out before you shower, avoiding the weekend wimp out, staying hydrated.
Okay, those are all great ideas. And then they also talk about the benefits of exercising with a friend.
Yeah, having a workout buddy can be really motivating, and it helps to keep you accountable.
Totally. And then they also suggest finding ways to exercise at home for convenience.
Right. There are tons of great workouts you can do at home with minimal equipment.
Perfect. No excuses. And then they really emphasize the importance of making your fitness a genuine priority.
Yeah, it's not about squeezing it in when you have time. It's about making it a non-negotiable part of your day.
Okay, I'm hearing you so prioritize your workouts and make them happen.
Exactly. And then they also offer specific recommendations for home training equipment, like dumbbells, barbells, an adjustable bench, and an aerobic machine.
Perfect. I'm going to start building my home gym today.
And then they strongly advise against approaching workouts haphazardly.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that. Like just going to the gym, doing whatever, I feel like.
Yeah, that's not the most effective approach.
So what do they recommend instead?
They emphasize the need for a clear plan with a defined strategy.
So like having a specific goal in mind for each workout.
Exactly. And maybe focusing on major muscle groups before smaller ones and keeping sessions relatively concise.
Okay, that makes sense. And then for aerobic training, they recommend things like interval training ladder workouts and maintaining a constant pace during hill workouts.
Yeah, those are all great methods for improving your cardiovascular fitness and endurance.
Awesome. And then they reiterate the general superiority of free weights over machines. Really, why is that?
Well, free weights engage a wider range of stabilizing muscles, leading to more functional strength development.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. And then they also emphasize the importance of proper form and using a stopwatch to ensure adequate rest periods.
Right. Those are both crucial for maximizing your results and preventing injuries.
Okay, so much great information about optimizing your fitness. Now, let's move on to weight loss strategies.
All right, let's do it. Weight loss is a topic that's on a lot of people's minds.
Definitely. And there's so much conflicting information out there, it's hard to know what to believe.
Well, the material starts by advocating a fundamental shift away from restrictive, unsustainable diets.
Okay, good, because those never seem to work in the long run.
Exactly. They're just not sustainable, and they can actually do more harm than good.
So what do they recommend instead?
They recommend adopting balanced, lifelong eating plans.
Okay, so it's about making sustainable lifestyle changes rather than going on a crash diet.
Exactly. And they highlight the importance of understanding the evolutionary roots of our tendency to overeat.
Oh, that's interesting. So our bodies are like hardwired to store fat.
Well, in a way, yes, our ancestors needed to store energy when food was scarce. But in our modern environment where food is abundant, this tendency can lead to weight gain.
That makes sense. And then they also tailor exercise recommendations to specific weight loss goals.
Right? They suggest around 30 minutes of daily activity for minor weight gain, but at least an hour for more significant weight loss.
And they emphasize the importance of finding activities that you enjoy so you're more likely to stick with them.
Exactly. If you hate running, don't force yourself to run. Find something else that you enjoy.
Totally. And then they also talk about the importance of developing emotional, financial, and physical responsibility.
Yeah, those are all important aspects of overall well-being.
And then they delve into specific strategies for controlling blood sugar levels.
Right, blood sugar control is crucial for weight management and for overall health.
So what are some of their recommendations for controlling blood sugar?
Well, things like considering fruit as more of a treat than a constant snack, being aware of hidden sugars and processed foods, choosing slow-burning carbohydrates, balancing your meals by eating smaller portions more frequently.
Okay, those are all great tips. And then they also offer a pragmatic tip for mitigating the impact of occasional overeating, the concept of calorie banking.
Yeah, so if you know you're going to have a big meal later, you can kind of bank some calories by eating less earlier in the day.
That's a good strategy. And then they also underscore the value of joining supportive diet groups.
Yeah, having a support system can make a big difference, especially when you're making lifestyle changes.
Totally. And then they also caution against the dangers of starvation diets.
Right. Those can really mess up your metabolism,
Yeah.
and they're not sustainable in the long run.
So it's about finding a healthy balance. And then they also talk about the importance of protein in a healthy diet.
All right. Protein is essential for building and repairing tissues, and it also helps to keep you feeling full and satisfied.
And then they also highlight the importance of different types of fats, particularly omega-3 fatty acids.
Yes, omega-3s are crucial for brain health, heart health, and overall well-being.
And then they even delve into the fascinating connection between our diet and neurotransmitters.
Right. Our brain chemistry is directly influenced by what we eat.
So it's like food affects not only our physical health, but also our mental and emotional health.
Exactly. And then they provide a whole bunch of practical tips for making your dietary plan work in the real world.
Awesome. Give me all the practical tips.
Well, things like planning your meals, shopping with a list, keeping healthy food readily available at home, eating breakfast, eating regularly throughout the day, drinking plenty of water.
Okay, those are all great tips. And then they also provide specific strategies for making healthier choices when eating out.
Yeah, like asking for your food to be prepared without oil or butter, choosing grilled or baked dishes over fried dishes, and being mindful of portion sizes.
And then they also caution against common dietary mind games that can sabotage weight loss efforts.
Right, like the misconception that only calories count, or the tendency to overindulge after exercise.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely fallen into those traps before.
We all have, but the key is to be aware of them and to challenge those thoughts.
Totally. And then they also emphasize the importance of striving for consistency over perfection.
Right. It's not about being perfect all the time. It's about making healthy choices most of the time.
And they offer valuable advice on how to strategically nourish your body during times of stress.
Yes, certain nutrients can help to support your adrenal glands and your nervous system during times of stress.
So it's like giving your body the extra support it needs when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. And then they also revisit the topic of snacking after dinner, suggesting that it can be permissible if you're active and eating a balanced diet.
Oh, interesting. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. It depends on the context. And then finally, they highlight the crucial role of water in facilitating fat burning, curbing cravings, and maintaining energy levels.
Yeah, water is so important, but it's easy to forget to drink enough.
Totally. They recommend aiming for at least 8 glasses per day.
Okay, I'm going to make a conscious effort to drink more water from now on.
Good for you. Hydration is key.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, optimizing our fitness, developing weight loss strategies, and now I think it's time to talk about empowering ourselves for change.
Yes, this is where the rubber meets the road. It's about taking all the knowledge we've gained and actually putting it into practice.
Exactly. And the material opens with a really compelling story called the 333 story.
Oh yeah, that's a great story. It's about a guy who overcame some pretty incredible challenges.
What were some of the challenges he faced?
Well, he was in a really bad car accident, and he was told he would never walk again, but he refused to believe it.
Wow, that's amazing. So what did he do?
He set a goal for himself to walk 333 steps, and he focused on how it can be done rather than why it might be impossible.
And did he achieve his goal?
He did, and then he kept setting bigger and bigger goals, and he eventually walked a mile and then a marathon.
Wow, that's such an inspiring story. It's like a testament to the power of belief and perseverance.
Exactly, and it highlights the importance of shifting our focus from limitations to possibilities.
I love that. And then the material goes on to offer practical strategies for upgrading your personal energy levels.
Right. Energy is essential for making change happen.
So what are some of their suggestions for boosting energy?
Well, things like eliminating toxic influences from your life and acknowledging and congratulating yourself for investing in your well-being.
Oh, yeah, it's important to celebrate those wins no matter how small.
Exactly. And then they also suggest cultivating key habits for a peak performance life.
Okay. What are some of those habits?
Well, things like consistent hydration, eat frequent and balanced meals, tackling at least one challenging task each day, engaging with self-help or motivational literature, listening to uplifting music, incorporating short power naps.
Wow, that's a lot to fit into one day, but I guess it's about making those things a priority.
Right. It's about creating a daily routine that supports your goals. And then they also offer additional tips for boosting energy, like regular exercise stretching, taking breaks, planning vacations, and even considering vitamin supplementation.
Okay, so it's like a multifaceted approach to energy management.
Exactly. And then they talk about the importance of understanding and consciously working with your personal comfort zone,
Oh, yeah, our comfort zones can be both a blessing and a curse.
right? They keep us safe, but they can also prevent us from growing.
So, how do we use our comfort zones to facilitate change?
Well, it's about recognizing the boundaries of our comfort zones and then consciously pushing beyond those boundaries.
So, it's like stepping outside of our comfort zones in small, incremental ways.
Exactly. And then they also talk about the importance of identifying your personal action strategies.
What do they mean by that?
Well, they're talking about whether you tend to be more proactive or reactive in your approach to life.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. Some people are more go-getters while others are more laid back.
Right. And then they also talk about understanding your key emotional trigger words.
Trigger words, what are those?
Well, they're words or phrases that evoke strong emotional responses in you, either positive or negative.
Oh, interesting. So it's like being aware of what sets you off.
Exactly. And then they also talk about recognizing your primary motivational direction.
So whether you're more motivated by moving towards something desirable or away from something undesirable.
Right. And understanding your primary decision-making references.
So whether you primarily rely on your own judgment or seek external